I have now finished 67 verses of the Tao, and I've written 67 essays on when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And this isn't just a clever play on words here. This is a quantum truth. As my friend Deepak Chopra has often said to me, quantum physics is not only stranger than you think it is, it's stranger than you can think. So that if you look at your origination, the place that you came from, this thing that Lao Tzu called the Tao, this great source that is everywhere, there is no place that it is not. And yet it is doing nothing. And yet it leaves nothing undone. If you go out and just go for a walk this afternoon when you get home, just look at the perfection of all that is. Just look at the clouds and look at the sky and look at the ocean and look at the trees and look at the leaves, and even more important, look at the space between the leaves. And look at the invisibleness and the perfection of how everything is. There's a constancy, if you will. And this constancy is always there. And your goal, my goal, in the time that I have with you here today, is to convince you to go to a place within yourself where you can emulate that divine perfection which requires you to do nothing, which never uses force, which never pushes itself, which recognizes something. I'm going to read to you just one of the verses of the Tao and a little bit of what I wrote about it. And I seldom read to an audience because I don't like being read to myself. But I'm just going to share a little bit of this. Here's what Lao Tzu said in verse 29. Do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. Everything under heaven is a sacred vessel and cannot be controlled. Trying to control leads to ruin. Trying to grasp, we lose. Allow your life to unfold naturally. Know that it too is a vessel of perfection. Just as you breathe in, breathe out. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger. To the sage, all of life is a movement toward perfection. So what need has he for the excessive, the extravagant, or the extreme? There's a time for everything. Imagine if you knew this. If you really knew that what you were experiencing emotionally in your life was a part of what there is a time for, and that you're not really doing anything. Lao Tzu says it over and over again. You're not doing anything. You're being done. You're being done right now. You're one of the 10,000 things. And it is all being done, all of it. Like I do yoga every morning, or almost every morning, 5-6 days a week. I do this 90-minute Bikram yoga, this hot yoga. And this has helped me so much with just that simple little thing, just remembering what it says in verse 29 of the Tao. That there are times when you're in the midst of yoga, when you have a position where you have to put this foot out, and you have to turn this one down, and you have to get down here like this, and you have to take this arm, and I'm going to do it. And you have to do that for 60 seconds in a 110-degree room. That's after doing many other postures as well. There was a time when I would do that and I'd be so exhausted, and all I could think about was, when is this 60 seconds going to be up? Oh my God, when are we going to get through with this posture? When are we going to get on to where I can lie down on the floor and finally... And I began to realize as this This doing the Tao thing has really changed me dramatically, so that now when I'm in that position with one arm down and one arm up, and it is exhausting, and you're stretching, and you've got your arm right next to your ear, and you're holding on, that you say to yourself, there's a time for being exhausted, and there's a time for rest. There's a time for things not to work out. Imagine if you knew that in the midst of my working with my daughter, for example, when I see the struggle that she's going to, and I can stand back and say, there's a time for her to experience this, and there's a time for her not to experience it. If you read Katie's life, you'll see that there was a time for deep depression. There was a time for fear. There was a time for anger and worry and despair, deep despair. And when you're in those things, if you could step outside of yourself and look at it and say, there's also a time for its opposite. As long as I'm incarnated into a physical world, there's a time for all of it. And as you do, you get to a new place in your life where you begin to look at all the things that are happening to you, because you remember verse 40 of the Tao says, it's all about returning. It's all about returning. Returning to what? Returning to the place from which you originated. The first 9 months of your life, you lived inside of your mother's womb in water. And during those whole 9 months, nobody could get in there and mess around with you. Nobody could get in there and get you to worry about anything. You didn't have sonograms that you'd look at and say, my God, I don't have a nose yet. What the hell's going on? I sure hope I get a nose. And you got into nose therapy and you worry about it. What if it doesn't happen? You don't do that. And all of a sudden, perfectly, it all unfolds in exactly the way it's going to unfold, independent of your opinion about it. You're not doing anything. Nothing is left undone. You're being done. You're being completed. And you were totally, completely at peace with it. You were surrendered to it. You allowed it. It wasn't a struggle. It wasn't. And then you popped out of there. And then you said, thank you, God. Thank you, Tao. Thank you, Source. We'll take over from here. And that was the biggest mistake. All of a sudden, you took over. And you edged God out. E-G-O. You edged God out. And you took on an ego, didn't you? And what is an ego? It's just an idea. Just an idea about who you are. Instead of being a piece of God, a piece of the Source, you decided, and those around you decided, that you were something different. And if you studied quantum physics, and you took the tiny little particle that began you, and you tried to find out where it came from, and reduced it down to its tiniest subatomic properties, ultimately you would discover what Lao Tzu knew. That it's the spirit that gives life. That you didn't come from a particle. That particles do not create particles. Particles do not come from particles. Originally, all particles come from an energy. A field of energy that has no beginnings and no ends and no boundaries. And that's who you are. And returning back to that, and letting go of the idea that who you are is what you have, and who you are is who you control. I don't think there's any more all-pervasive theme in the Tao Te Ching than the idea of being a non-interferer. Do you, Stephen? I mean, isn't it? It's about not interfering, isn't it? It's about letting go. It's about allowing. It's about detaching. It's about disconnecting yourself from this belief that you are in charge of other people. I'm the father of 8 children and the father of motivation. That's what they tell me, so I've got... And as this father of 8 children, one of the things that I've recognized and what has made me, I think, a better parent, particularly even since I've been doing this, is my willingness to, I call it the bite your tongue verse of the Tao. Just hang back just for a second, just as you're about to interfere, just as you're about to lay it on and tell somebody else how they should be and what they should do and how they should do it, you step back and realize that what Khalil Gibran, the great Lebanese poet, in writing in The Prophet, said was just a basic truth. Your children are not your children. They are the products of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not for you. And you step back, and I can't even begin to tell you how freeing it is to realize that you don't have anything to do. You don't have anyone to control. You can be at peace. And I watch, and I've become much more of an observer, even on airplanes. I was in London 5 days ago. And I don't know if you've flown in and out of Heathrow lately, but things have really changed. You know, we couldn't take anything on the plane. The terrorists, whoever they are selling fear, and we respond with more fear. Every time you use force, you create a counterforce. And then another counterforce, and before you know, and the Tao teaches us all. I mean, one of the great lessons in the Tao is that any country that has its primary resources and its energy placed on building weapons is not of the Tao. And those countries that have their consciousness located in the Tao put their energy into tractors and building homes and growing food, not building weapons. I saw a movie not too long ago with Nicolas Cage about warlords or something, the Lords of War, I think it was something like that. One of those alarming things about how much energy we are in the world creating, energy to destroy ourselves. That we have literally created from our consciousness enough weaponry on this planet to eliminate all life within just a few moments. It's all there. It's all there for us. We've allowed ourselves to move so far away from the great teachings of the great spiritual masters. And we believe that we're a Christian nation or that we're a spiritual nation when we find ourselves having moved away from these simple principles and then getting upset with other people because we can have these kind of weapons, but they can't. And we don't look hard enough at ourselves and all the ways that we have deflected ourselves from the greatest teachings of all of the great spiritual masters. Because I believe so strongly in the message of public television. I believe so strongly in the idea that we have a spiritual deficit in this country, and that we don't have an information deficit. There's plenty of that, but there's a deficit of spirit, a deficit that says there's not enough of us that feel connected to the highest and the greatest part of ourselves. And these top 10 principles that I have put together here for this program, you might want to jot down. You might want to go into your desk and just take out a little piece of paper. But I think if you practice them and look at them and see them, they come from someone who's had a burning desire, but has also been living a life in which I have felt independent of the opinions of others in terms of whether or not I should or shouldn't be doing that. There's something that I allow to consult myself, within myself, rather than looking outside to see if this is right or not. And so let me just I'll number them and I'll go through them and I'll give you some examples of them, and you decide whether they're to your liking or whether they work or not. The first of these principles came from a Vedantic scholar in the 10th century. His name was Tilopa. It's not exactly bestseller books, but it's the kind of thing that really excites me, because I think of going back 1,000 years or 2,000 years and reading what some of the greatest minds had to say and how open they were to the potentiality that each and every one of us have for greatness. And this first principle says, as Talopa put it, have a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing. One of the central principles of my life is that no one knows enough to be a pessimist about anything. And that each and every one of us, when we close our mind to what is possible for us or what is possible for humanity, closes off the genius that resides and lives in each and every one of us. Having an open mind doesn't necessarily mean finding fault with all of the things that you've been taught by others. It means opening yourself up to the potentiality and the possibility that anything and everything is possible. So having a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing really means finding within ourselves the ability to get rid of a trait that I find so common in the contemporary world. Do you know that most people that I meet spend their lives looking for occasions to be offended? They actually are out there hoping that they can find some reason to be offended. And there's no shortage of reasons. They're out there everywhere. The way this person dressed, what this person said, they turn on their TV, they hear the news, they're offended by this, someone used language that they didn't like, someone doesn't share the same customs that you, and people all day long. In fact, if you keep track tomorrow, you will find probably 100 reasons that you can go around being offended. But a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing is a mind that says, I'm never looking for anything to be offended by. And that whatever anybody else out there has to say, my response to that is, that's an interesting point of view. I've never considered that before. I remember being interviewed for a morning television show, and the woman that was interviewing me said, how does it feel to be talking to audiences where people have all of these strange beliefs, these weird things that they come to? And it intrigues me because one of the things that Emerson said is in one of his very first essays. He says the first thing we have to say respecting what are called new views here in New England, where we are right now, is that they are not new, but the very oldest of thoughts cast into the mold of these new times. And that was in 1842. He was speaking about that. And this woman asked me the question. She said, doesn't it offend you that there's people out there and they're talking about people using crystals to heal somebody? And I remember my response. My response was that if I've got hemorrhoids and somebody out there is convincing me that crystals are going to heal them, I'm ordering crystal chairs. Why not? I mean, all you have to do is understand something called a placebo. And what is a placebo? It's nothing more than a convincing belief. If I hand you this pill and say this pill is going to cure your arthritis, and you take it and the pill is just a sugar pill, but your arthritis disappears, I'm into buying those placebos. Where can I get some of those placebos? And it's true of everything. And it's when you think about all the things that we enjoy and what our life is like, it took people who had a mind that wasn't closed to allow us to make the progress that we've made. Progress is impossible if you always do things the way you've always done things. But the other word in this, what Talopa said, is be attached nowhere. Be attached nowhere. Attachment really means I am deluding myself into a belief that if I can't have or if I can't do this or that thing, then somehow I am going to become immobilized. So an open mind that is detached. In my most recent book, in A Spiritual Solution to Every Problem, I have an observation. And it's an observation from Anthony DeMello, a man I respect enormously, a priest. who, in The Way to Love, puts it this way. Here's a great test for your relationships, especially the relationships that you're in with those whom you love. Not your children, but your spouses and your lovers and so on. Try this test on for size. 1, I am not really attached to you at all. I am merely deluding myself into the belief that without you, I will not be happy. And 2, and here's the toughest test for non-attachment, I leave you free to be yourself, to think your thoughts, indulge your tastes, follow your inclinations, behave in ways that you decide are to your liking. How's that for a challenge? And so what most of us do in our relationships, and why they are not as successful as we would like them to be, is that we become attached, and we tell ourselves that if this person behaves in a way that I find offensive, then I can't be happy. I make my happiness, my fulfillment dependent upon those people that I love being what I think that they should be. And detachment doesn't mean being a victim. It just simply means I know that I can make my life fulfilled and happy by having a mind that is open to everything and attached nowhere. The second principle is a very simple principle. It says you can't give away what you don't have. Now it sounds ridiculous, okay? But it's more than what meets the ear as you hear this. You can't give away what you don't have. People who are not good at giving away love can't give away love because they don't have it to give away. If I want to give you a dozen oranges, I can't give you those dozen oranges unless I go out and pick up 12 oranges someplace. Otherwise, all it is just empty rhetoric. And the same thing is true of virtually everything in your life. You can't give away love for others if you don't have love in here to give away. If what you have in here is contempt, if what you have in here is anger, if what you have in here is fear, then these are the things you're going to be giving away in your life. And I've often thought, and I really believe very strongly that there's a law, sort of a law in the universe. I call it the law of attraction. And the law of attraction is one that works like this. You get back from the universe, from the world, what it is that you put out there in the world. And if you're putting out there into the world that I am not worthy of attracting something beautiful into my life, that the universe will respond back to you with exactly that message. And there are people who come to me, and who came to me for years when I had my own counseling practice and so on, and they would say to me, I just keep attracting the same kind of people, the same kind of events, the same kind of losers into my life. Why is that? Why do I keep doing that? And I keep attracting an absence of abundance. I just can't seem to attract abundance into my life. I'm always behind the 8 ball. I'm never getting ahead. And I suggested to them, I said, did it ever occur to you that that's the very kind of message you're sending out to the world and out to the universe? That the ocean of abundance is there. And you can go to that ocean of abundance, and you can take a Mack truck, and you can fill it up 20 times a day, and take it out of there, and guess what? It doesn't impact at all the ocean of abundance. It doesn't even go down a zillionth of an inch. It's unlimited. Or you can go to the same ocean of abundance with a eyedropper, and you can just take this much out once a month and say, that's all that seems to be available for me. And the interesting thing for me is that when people go to this ocean of abundance, this unlimited world, all that I have is thine, it says in the holy books. All that I have is thine. It's all there for you. But if you believe inside that it's limited, that you can only get so much, that other people are going to get it before you do, then you'll find yourself creating that very same thing. And the even more interesting part about this "you can't give away what you don't have" principle is that if your message to the universe is gimme, 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 which is a lot of people's message to the universe. I want this from you, I want that from you, please give me this, I have to have that. That's what their prayer is like, that's what their message is, and they say, I want this from the universe, gimme, gimme, gimme. The universe's response back to that kind of a mentality is exactly the same. The universe will say right back to you over and over again, gimme, gimme, gimme. And you'll find yourself never ever arriving, but always being in a state of striving, always feeling as if you're being neglected, never feeling as if you have enough, always feeling as if you're being shortchanged, because you're constantly under the pressure to give, to get back what the universe is demanding from you. And the interesting thing about all of this, the irony of this, is that if you shift that and you say to the universe, to the world, how may I serve? How may I serve? The universe's response back to you is, how may I serve you? How may I serve you? And it's very intriguing. When you take your energy and your attention off of what you are demanding from the world, and instead saying, what can I give to the world? And it's really the basis behind that very famous line of the President John Kennedy's inaugural address. Ask not what your country can do, ask what you can do for your country. And the irony of that is, and I've learned that in my own life, that when I stopped thinking about what was in it for Wayne Dyer and how much could I get, and I began to shift and say, how can I help you? How can I give to you? What can I do for you? And people who write to me, I send them something. When I encounter somebody that needs help of some kind, I'm very often just giving that to them. And then I find that it just keeps coming back into my life. And once I shifted that energy off of what can I have into what can I give, it seemed to me that the universe responded back with the very same message. What can I give to you? And the most incredible and wonderful and beautiful abundance has flowed into my life in every way that I can possibly think of. You can't give away what you don't have. So take a look at an inventory of what you do have. How much do you love yourself? How much kindness do you have in you? How much peace do you have in you? How much joy do you have in you? And if you're able to give that away as many times as you can in a given day, watch and see how much more of that continues to show up and come back in your life. Okay? The third principle is one of my very favorites. It's called, there are no justified resentments. And this is a very difficult principle for many people to get, but one that I believe very strongly in. I was in a group one time of drug addicts and alcoholics. And I was one of the people that was a sponsor and leading this group. And the sign on the wall said, there are no justified resentments in this group. And what I said to that group that night was, no matter what anybody says to you here, no matter what kind of anger comes directed towards you, no matter how much hate you may encounter showing up in your life, there are no justified resentments. Meaning that if you carry around resentment inside of you about anything or about anyone, and I'm talking about the person that you lent money to and hasn't paid you back, I'm talking about the person in your life that you feel was abusive in your life, I'm talking about the person who walked out on you and left you for somebody else, I'm talking about all of the things that you have justified in your heart and in your life that you have the right to be resentful about. And I'm suggesting to you that those resentments will always end up harming you and creating in you a sense of despair. I've often said that no one ever dies from a snake bite. The snake bite will never kill you. You cannot be unbitten. Once you're bitten, you're bitten. But it's the venom that continues to pour through your system after the bite that will end up destroying you. So now you have to take a look at all of the resentments that you may have in your life. And I'd like to suggest to you that I think there is a wonderful metaphor for this that I have created in my life for how to make this work. And I think that Regis Philbin is the one who's responsible for it, all right? My buddy Regis. There's a show called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire that has been popular all over the world. I'm in South Africa, it comes on, all right? I was in Australia, and they've got their own Australian version. And in Greece, they have the Greek edition of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And basically, this show has two levels that you have to get to. Now, the first level is the $1,000 level. And at the $1,000 level, you basically have to answer a question like, on your hand, you have some digits. Those digits on your hand are called your feet, your nose, your ears, your fingers. And everybody who ever goes on the show has this horrible dread that they're going to go out on one of those questions, right? So basically, in order to get to the $1,000 level, all you have to do is answer 5 pretty simple questions in order to get to the $1,000 level. Now, on this program, the $1,000 level for you in this metaphor means that you will leave with something if you get this. At least get this. This is the $1,000 level. You must send blame out of your life for any conditions of your life. Blame has to go. All right? Now, blame means if you're sitting there with a disease, you say without guilt, it's mine, I take responsibility for it. This means that if you have been through any tough circumstances in your life, this means if you have a minimal amount of financial security in your life, this means if your children don't get along with you, this means that if your neighbors are taking up a petition to get you out of the neighborhood, whatever it might be that's going on in your life, you name it, and everybody across this great country and across this world has a series of these things that you're willing to say, I am here because of the choices that I have made right now. I'm willing to say that. Even though it's difficult, and we know it's really not your fault. We know really there's a lot of people out there who are really bad, all right? But you're willing to say no blame. That's the first level, all right? That's where you understand no justified resentment. And then on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show, there is what is called the $32,000 level. And the $32,000 level is not only an opportunity for you to walk away with a sizable amount of goodies, which you can walk away from tonight in this program, but it also is the door opener to multi-wealth. But you got to get to this in order to have an opportunity to move into these transcendent levels, all right? Millionaire spiritual status. All right? You got to get through these next 5 questions. And this $32,000 question, or level rather, comes to this. It came to me from a quotation that I used in the writing of A Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. I read a book that was written a couple of thousand years ago by Patanjali, the Yoga Sutras, the aphorisms of Patanjali. And one of those sutras, one of those aphorisms, observations that this brilliant man made almost 2,000 years ago was this. He said, if you become steadfast in your abstentions of thoughts of harm directed towards others, all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in your presence. Now this translates to blame, pretty basic, no more blame. I'm just not going to assign responsibility to other people for where I am, because now I have an opportunity to get rid of it. If I think someone else caused it, then I've got to wait for somebody else to change in order for me to get rid of it, and you might wait forever for that. But if I take responsibility for it, I can do something, including move on, which might be the most important thing to do. All right? But at the higher level, when there are no justified resentments, what you are doing is what St. Francis did, Francesco. What you are doing is you are at a place where you are sending love in response to hate. You are literally saying, no matter what comes my way, I am going to be steadfast in my abstention of thoughts of harm directed toward others. I'm going to work hard at, no matter what comes my way, having it come out of me what I want to come out of me, and that is love, and that is a higher energy. And if you can get to that level, Patanjali said, all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in your presence. I have a little girl, a precious little girl. I have 6 precious girls and 2 precious sons, but I have a little girl who is almost 12. And she loves animals like no one I've ever met in my life. I mean, her whole life revolves around animals. And when we walk in the woods, butterflies avoid me, fly away from people around, and they come and they land right on her arm, and it happens all the time. All living creatures, she couldn't have a thought of harm directed towards any living creature, and Patanjali said to us, all living creatures will cease to feel fear or enmity or anger in the presence of those who can send love in response to hate. That's what I mean when I say there are no justified resentments. What I'd like to do, I'd like to share a little story here with you. It's a very tender story. It was sent to me by someone who sends me beautiful things in the mail. And I call it the Teddy story. And I'd like to read this to you, if I can do it without tearing up. And this story illustrates this as well as anything I've ever seen. There's a story many years ago of an elementary school teacher. Her name was Mrs. Thompson. As she stood in front of her 5th grade class on the very first day of school, she told the children a lie. Like most teachers, she looked at her students and said that she loved them all the same. But that was impossible, because there in the front row, slumped in his seat, was a little boy named Teddy Stoddard. Mrs. Thompson had watched Teddy the year before and noticed that he didn't play well with the other children, that his clothes were messy, and that he constantly needed a bath. Teddy could be unpleasant. It got to the point where Mrs. Thompson would actually take delight in marking his papers with a broad red pen and making bold X's and then putting a big F at the top of his papers. At the school where Mrs. Thompson taught, she was required to review each child's past records, and she put Teddy's off until last. However, when she reviewed his file, she was in for a surprise. Teddy's 1st grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is a bright child with a ready laugh. He does his work neatly and he has good manners. He's a joy to be around." His 2nd grade teacher wrote, "Teddy's an excellent student, well liked by his classmates, but he's troubled because his mother has a terminal illness and life at home must be a struggle." His 3rd grade teacher wrote, "His mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but his father doesn't show much interest, and his home life will soon affect him if steps aren't taken." Teddy's 4th grade teacher wrote, "Teddy's withdrawn and doesn't show up much interest in school. He doesn't have many friends, and sometimes he even sleeps in class." By now, Mrs. Thompson realized the problem, and she was ashamed of herself. She felt even worse when her students brought her Christmas presents wrapped in beautiful ribbons and bright paper, except for Teddy's. His present was clumsily wrapped in heavy brown paper that he got from the grocery bag. Mrs. Thompson took pains to open it in the middle of the other presents. Some of the children started to laugh when she found a rhinestone bracelet with some of the stones missing and a bottle that was 1/4 full of perfume. But she stifled her children's laughter when she exclaimed how pretty the bracelet was, putting it on and dabbing some of the perfume on her wrist. Teddy Stoddard stayed after school that day just long enough to say, "Mrs. Thompson, today you smell just like my mom used to." After the children left, she cried for at least an hour. On the very day, she quit teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, and instead, she began to teach children. Mrs. Thompson paid particular attention to Teddy. As she worked with him and his mind seemed to come alive, the more she encouraged him, the faster he responded. By the end of the year, Teddy had become one of the smartest children in the class, and despite her lie, became one of her teacher's pets. A year later, she found a note under the door from Teddy telling her that she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 6 years went by before she got another note from Teddy. He then wrote that he had finished high school third in his class, and she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 4 years after that, she got another letter saying that while things had been tough at times, he stayed in school and stuck with it, and would soon graduate from college with the highest of honors. He assured Mrs. Thompson that she was still the very best and favorite teacher he ever had in his whole life. Then 4 more years passed, and yet another letter came. This time he explained that after he got his bachelor's degree, he decided to go a little further. The letter explained that she was still the best and favorite teacher he ever had, but now his name was a little longer. The letter was signed Theodore F. Stoddard, M.D. But the story doesn't end there. You see, there was yet another letter that spring. Teddy said he'd met this girl and was going to be married. He explained that his father had died a couple of years ago, and he was wondering if Mrs. Thompson might agree to sit in the place at the wedding that was usually reserved for the mother of the groom. Of course, Mrs. Thompson did, and guess what? She wore that bracelet, the one with the several rhinestones missing. And she made sure she was wearing the perfume that Teddy remembered his mother wearing on their last Christmas together. They hugged each other, and Dr. Stoddard whispered in Mrs. Thompson's ear, "Thank you so much for making me feel important and showing me that I could make a difference." Mrs. Thompson came with tears in her eyes and whispered back, "Teddy, you have it all wrong. You were the one who taught me that I could make a difference. I didn't know how to teach until I met you." Isn't that a beautiful story? Yeah. That symbolizes there are no justified resentments. Work at reaching that $32,000 level, the place where the only thing you have to send is love, because that's what's inside. And that's the message of our greatest spiritual teachers. That's all they ever had to give away. The next principle I call "Don't die with your music still in you." And who better to quote than Thoreau right here in Concord when he talked about some of us hear a different drummer, and we must march to the music that we hear. But all of you, everybody watching, everybody here in this beautiful parish, all of you have some music playing. And all of you have a heroic mission. There's no accidents in this universe. We all show up here with a purpose. There's an intelligence that is a part of everything and everyone, and all of us are connected to it. And too many of us are afraid to listen to that music and march to it. You out there, I know you have a book you wanted to write. I know there's a composition you wanted to compose. I know there's a song you want to sing someplace. Maybe you want to raise horses out in Montana. Or maybe you want to open up an ice cream shop on Cape Cod. Who knows what it may be. Maybe you just want to travel and see the world. Maybe you want to go into a relationship with someone but you've been afraid to, but your heart says it's the right thing to do. All of us feel something. And in Leo Tolstoy's famous novel, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, he asks this question that would be terrifying to me. He says, as he has his accountant from Moscow lying on his deathbed, contemplating the horror of this question, what if my whole life has been wrong? I've known what my music is. It's playing right now. As I stand here in front of you with these cameras and in this place, and as I sit down and write my books and tell the world what I know are my truths, I feel always completely on purpose and fulfilled. And no time will I ever come to the end of my life and say, what if my whole life has been wrong? Whoever you are, whatever that music is, however distant it may sound, however strange, however weird others may interpret it to be, don't get to the end of your life and know that you're going to leave and not have it played yet. Don't die with your music still in you. It's the message of the greatest teachers who've ever walked among us. It's the message I give to you today as one of the principles for success and peace in your life. The next principle I call embracing silence. And embracing silence is not that I say this to you because it's so important to be quiet. What I have learned, I have a dear friend, and many of you know, we've put out tapes together, we've appeared on stages all over the world together. He's like a brother to me. His name is Dr. Deepak Chopra, a medical doctor, and a dear and close friend. And whenever anything is going on in my family, if I'm having a problem with one of my children or in my own life, and if I call him up and I'll say, Deepak, or his wife Rita, I'll say, Deepak, what do you think I should do? He always has the same answer, meditate. I'll say, yes, Deepak, I understand meditate, but I said, what do you think? He said, Wayne, go deep inside and meditate. Always meditate. I'll say, will you put Rita on? Wayne, meditate. I say, all right. And you know, I've learned a lot in meditation. But what I know most about getting quiet and getting peaceful is this, that there's only one power in the universe, and it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it soul, spirit, consciousness, God. You can call it Louise. You can call it anything that you want. But as Alan Watts said, you can't get wet from the word water. It's not what we call something that gives it its substance. And this one power, this one force that flows through everything and allows everything to be, is indivisible. You can't cut it in half. You can't divide it. It's one. It's knowing the one. And everything in your life is almost always given a division. Male, female, young, old, tall, short, black, white, good, bad, up, down. These are all dichotomies. These are all these splits that we all have in our lives. The whole physical world that we live in and are immersed in, it's always immersed in this division. I used to teach a course at St. John's University in New York, and I used to tell my students, when I was trying to teach this principle, anybody who can come to class and bring with them a magnet that only has a North Pole, I'll give you an A in the course. You don't ever have to attend another class. And no matter how thin they would slice that magnet, there was always the South Pole, because the physical world is made up of dichotomies. But we have to learn to fuse the dichotomies. And in fusing the dichotomies and blending the one, that's what silence does for us. That's why embracing silence is so powerful. Because no matter how many times you cut silence in half, it's like zero. You still only get silence. In Zen, they say it's the space between the bars that holds the tiger. And it's the silence between the notes that makes the music. These words that are coming out of my mouth right now come out of the silence. And finding that silence and embracing it means that you go to the place within you that you cannot divide. Just like you can't divide the source, the one, the spirit. You can't divide that either. It's only one. So when you go into your silence and you begin to practice meditation and you begin to make this a part of your life and embrace silence, what you discover is this is where you'll come to know your source. You'll make conscious contact with your source. I can't tell you how many people that have come to me who have suffered from serious illnesses, who've been given diagnoses that it's terminal and that that you can't do it, who have gone out to the wilderness and have decided that I am going to commune with nature. And the transcendentalists, Thoreau and Emerson, they believed that nature was our source and that we were all products of nature. And if you can get back to your source, if you can get back to that feeling of being with Spirit, that's where healing can take place. And I've had wonderful stories of people who've told me that it was when I began to embrace that silence that I began to feel more connected to my source. Embrace silence, because it's a way to come to know God, to know your source. Both are indivisible, and the only experience you can have in your daily life that even comes close to a spiritual awakening is silence. The next principle I call giving up your personal history. And I learned it from a man named Carlos Castaneda, who once said that one day, he said, I finally realized that I no longer needed a personal history. And just like drinking, he said, I gave it up. And that, and only that, has made all the difference in the world. You know the nice thing about giving up your personal history is that if you don't have a story, you don't have to live up to it. All of us have these bags of manure that we carry around with us called our past, and the people who have done things to us, and the events and the circumstances, all of this stuff that we use and we bond to. And we bond ourselves to these wounds of our past, and we identify ourselves on the basis of these wounds. And every once in a while we set it down and we reach in there and we smear it all over ourselves. And then we wonder, why does my life smell so bad? I don't understand this. When in fact, the now, this moment, merging yourself into the now, means that you may have been in a relationship. I had a woman from Holland who came over to see me, whose husband had left her after 25 years. She had 4 children, and she just had been on the verge of suicide. And she was losing weight, and she was depressed, and she was taking all kinds of drugs for it, and she was getting sicker and sicker because she just couldn't get over it. And she came to a book signing that I was doing at a bookstore down in Florida. And she said, you've got to say something to me. You've got to say something to me that will help me to get over this. And I told her this line. I said, give up your personal history. Merge yourself here, now, into this moment. And those 25 years are something, if you want to understand how to do it, think of your past as, oh, this hat. And this is your past. Now, you can't just set this thing down over here and walk away from it and give up your personal history, because you'll always have it there to look back at. What you do is you pick up your past and you embrace it. You understand it, you accept it as, I had to go through these things that I had to go through in order for me to get to this place today, and the evidence for that is that I did. You don't need any more evidence. You did. And then you toss it. You toss it. You embrace it and you toss it. And you merge into the now by giving up your attachment. And some of you have heard me use the metaphor of the wake. Alan Watts talked about the wake is not what drives the boat. The wake is just a trail that is left behind. That's all it is. And so is the wake of your life. And the wake doesn't make the boat go, and neither does the wake of your life the reason why your life is going in the direction that it is. The wake is a trail that is left behind, and it's an illusion to believe that it is the cause of your suffering or your struggles or your difficulty. Give it up. Let it go. Embrace it, understand it, get help doing that if you must, and then move into the now. The next principle I call, it's from a line of Albert Einstein. He said, you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. In order to work at solving these things called problems in your life, you have to change your mind. It is your mind where they live. It is your mind that created them. There is where you experience them. They're all illusions. You must change your mind. Literally rewrite your agreement with reality. One of the things I had said earlier is that one of the most difficult things to do in the world is to admit that you were wrong. Admitting that you were wrong is nothing more than saying, I have been making choices with my mind that have created things in my life that are not working. And I no longer intend to continue making those choices. I was wrong. You don't have to make a declaration of it. You don't have to go out and feel guilty about it. You just simply say, it didn't work. The relationship that I was in before, I behaved in these ways. I didn't realize that it wasn't working for me. Now I do, and this is where I choose to be now. The secret of a successful relationship is, to me, understanding that you put your attention and your energy in a person on what you love rather than what you don't love. Robert Frost said it so beautifully. We love the things we love for what they are. For what they are. Not for what they ought to be, not for what they used to be, but for what they are. So when you look into the eyes of a person you're in a relationship with, whether it's your children, you catch them doing things right as much as you possibly can. That's oftentimes takes a lot of hunting, but you'll find it. And when you think that my relationship isn't working, remember, it's in my mind. What am I thinking about that person? And if I could just change my mind and put my thoughts on what I love about this person and keep them there, that makes the relationship flourish. And there are people who go through their entire relationship history with no anger, no hatred, no bitterness, and only love. The next principle is, I call it, treating yourself as if you already were what you would like to become. In other words, you get out in front of your life and you see yourself as having already what you know you'd like to have and deserve to have. My children know how to do this perfectly. I have a daughter who wanted a prom dress, and the prom dress was way outside the budget that I thought a prom dress should be. Well, I thought a prom dress shouldn't cost over $20, so I do have a problem, right? But I upped it to somewhere around $250. I don't know how much, whatever. To me, it was still more than I paid for my first house, okay? But at any rate, she called and said, Dad, this is the only prom dress I could wear. I've got to wear this prom dress. If I don't wear this prom dress, it's just on and on and on with this wonderful. You know, I saw a wonderful book about how to raise teenage daughters. The title of it is Get Out of My Life. But first, drive me and Cheryl to the mall, all right? That's the actual title. It's a good book. And so I told Serena, I said, it's just beyond the budget. I've got a certain amount of money that I'm willing to put for it. And she said, but I've already seen myself wearing it. I've already tried it on. I have a picture of myself in the dress in my living room, and I've already showed it to the guy who's taking me to the prom. I mean, it was this whole thing about, and she already saw herself in it. I said, well, if you see yourself in it, then you're going to have to also see yourself as earning the difference between what I'm willing to pay. And she drew up a contract. She went onto the computer, and on the background of the computer, you know, where they have these little background things they put on, there was 500 pictures of the dress, all right? And she signed a contract and said, I'll babysit, I'll do this, I'll do that, and I will pay the difference. And she did, and she wore the dress, because she understood that you treat yourself as if you already are what you'd like to become. There's a genius in you. You have to treat yourself as if you already were that genius. There's something you're completely capable of. See yourself as already there. Then you'll act upon those thoughts, because the ancestor to every action, said Emerson, is a thought. The next principle is called treasuring your divinity. Treasuring your divinity. There's a wonderful observation that I saw from Emerson in Self-Reliance. It's about trusting your divinity, knowing that you are connected to your source, knowing that you are a divine creation and that there are no accidents. He said, a man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his own thought because it's his own. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with a certain alienated majesty. We often reject our thoughts, and we see the things that we think of as grand and as genius, and we reject them because they're our own. Treasuring our divinity instead of being terrified of it. Knowing that I am always connected to my source. There is no way that I cannot, because it is in you, and I am in you, and you are in me, and you can never be separated from it. There is no place that this source is not. It grows everybody's fingernails. It beats everybody's hearts. It digests everybody's foods. It opens all the flowers, and you're always connected to it. And finally, the last principle I call wisdom is avoiding all thoughts which weaken you. You know, every thought has an energy, just like everything else in the universe. And if you have a thought of shame, it will weaken your muscles. And what is your heart but a muscle? If you raise a child who believe in shame and feel ashamed of themselves, every time they think that shameful thought, they will be weakened. And if you have a thought of fear, and if you have a thought of stress, and you have a thought of anguish and anxiety, all of these thoughts and many more are the thoughts that will always weaken you. When you are having a thought that you know is disempowering you, shift it. Shift it to one that is empowering rather than disempowering. And the thoughts that empower are thoughts of neutrality and willingness and love, and ultimately thoughts of divinity. And when you see a troubled person who is out there struggling at the highest level of unity consciousness or God consciousness or spiritual consciousness, you recognize yourself in all that you see. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And I am connected to that person. Changing your thoughts. I appeared on the Tonight Show many years ago, several times, quite a few times. And I remember coming home from the Tonight Show, and I was walking along the beach, and they had taped the show the night before, and I was out for a walk, and a woman who lived in the Northeast stopped me, and she said, "Didn't I see you last night on the, how could you be here?" I said, "Well, I flew the red eye, and I was walking along." And she said, "You know, we're moving down here." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like?" And I said to her, I said, "Well, what are they like where you live?" She said, "Well," she said, I live in a very big city." And she said, "They're very pushy. And people are not very kind. And they don't have time for you." And she said, "It's really not very pleasant." She said, "That's one of the reasons I'm leaving there." I said, "Well, that's pretty much what you're going to find here." That's basically what the people are like here. On the way back on the same day, someone else who had seen me the night before on the Tonight Show, who had lived in the Midwest, stopped me and asked me almost the same question. She said, "You live here?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, my husband and I are moving here and we're looking for a school." She said, "What are the people like here? What's it like here?" I said, "What are they like in Chicago where you live?" She said, "Oh," she said, "it's the Midwest." She said, "People are very friendly, they're open, they open their homes to you, they're very loving, they're very kind." She said, "It's a wonderful place." She said, "I love that, I'm going to really miss that." I said, "That's pretty much what you're going to find here." It's what you expect, it's what you think about that expands. It's what Emerson taught us. The ancestor to every action is a thought. Change your thoughts, and you change your world. Change your expectations, and you change around what you begin to manifest and see showing up in your life. Thank you very much.
What you have to ask yourself is, what direction am I going? I mean, who you are, who all of us are, our source energy, we have it within us. But the problem is that we walk away from it. It's like you can't walk away from what you are. And what you are has a spark of God in you. And the best way to know that when it isn't ego, these two forces, the Kabbalah teaches us that there are two forces. There's the force of light and there's a force of dark. And it's all the same force. But basically, it's like, what direction is it going? When it is moving towards hatred and bitterness and anger and judgment and resentment, resentment and fear and anxiety and stress and pain and so on. When you are moving in that direction, and I believe this and have written about this myself.
Wayne Dyer was an icon in self-development and spiritual growth. He wrote over 40 books, including an astonishing 21 New York Times bestsellers. His childhood was spent in orphanages and foster homes, but he'd go on to inspire millions and become known as the father of motivation. In this exclusive radio show provided by our partners at Hay House, Wayne Dyer explains how to overcome hardships, use gratitude to grow, and enter a state of bliss. And if you want even more great Hay House content, check out their YouTube channel. We've linked it up down in the description below.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us for the show Wishes Fulfilled with Dr. Wayne Dyer. And we just opened up the phone lines, and Dr. Wayne Dyer is joining us from Maui after a very busy couple of weeks.
Let's grab somebody.
So let's start in Portland and go to Jeannie on line 1, and she's in Portland, Oregon.
Hi, Jeannie.
Hello. Oh,
Hi
hi.
there.
How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you, my dear?
I am good. Thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
So I'm in the middle of writing a book, and I guess genre-wise, it's kind of a wellness memoir. And it started out, I was going to write a whole different book really about listening to your intuition, and it still is hugely about that and following it and letting, that inner guidance from above, let that lead your life and how it brings you through life. And, a lot of what you basically, I think, teach, but through my story. And, when I was young, I was like 17 when I started writing letters to God. And each time I wrote, I felt so much better. And then I would take them and just immediately go burn them in the fireplace. And when I was 25, my brother died. And I actually bought a hardcover book and started writing in that and just couldn't bear to throw what I'd written away. So now, 27 years later and 41 journals later, I'm writing this. And I did go down to Hay House and take their workshop. And Jennifer Grace, who I think you might know, is doing a book proposal class. I'm doing that, and I'm following what she's saying to do to get this book proposal done. And it's just, what little gist of the story is, I was married for 26 years, had a really beautiful life. We were kind of the nucleus of our family, our friends, nieces, nephews. And then my husband went and had an affair with a 27-year-old girl, which was our oldest daughter's age. So we were just broken apart. And if you can imagine a spider web, we were the center. Now there's all this brokenness, and as I'm going and reading through my journals to write my book, because I've actually have a beautiful life now, and it's been 2 years since my divorce, almost to today, I think, which is weird. And I have a really beautiful life, but everyone else, I feel like it's my family, my nieces, my nephews, friends, they're all still back in, they're trying to wrap their head around what even happened in the first place. And there's still all this brokenness. And it's almost like I'm at this point of writing where I need a little release somehow. And I don't know if you ever wrote something that, you're going back and reading and having a lot of awareness and writing it, and it's hard to write. How do you push yourself forward through that? And
I think the way to do that, Jeannie, is to see this 27-year-old person that your husband had an affair with as a gift from God, as a teacher. I did a film called My Greatest Teacher, which was really the story of my relationship and trying to find my father. And it turns out that what he did when I was a young boy and all of his horrible, crass behavior and so on were really the impetus for my being able to reach to higher and higher levels. And while you're reviewing that and looking at that in your writing and so on, instead of coming at it from a place of brokenness, come at it from a place of completeness, and realize that she was sent into your life probably to help you to, first of all, get to that place of freedom that you feel now, as a result of it. And secondly, to help you to look back upon it as you write about it, not from a place of this is terrible and it shouldn't have happened, which is what so many of your family members are doing, but from a place of gratitude, of being in a space of gratitude. and write from that place of gratitude and allow the divine guidance that brings to you, to come to you and to flow through you. And you'll watch your writing. You'll watch it. Because when I wrote, I Can See Clearly Now, and I really encourage you to read that when it comes out.
Yes, I keep wanting to hear it and read it. And
especially in terms of what you are asking me about right now, because I did a lot of reliving as I went through that. And I began to write first I started to write from that place of the pain and the hurtfulness, like when my wife and I separated, or when I found out I had leukemia, or when I was living in an orphanage, and, all of the kinds of things that have been benchmarks in my life. And I would find myself just feeling much more spiritual, much more peaceful when I looked at it as gifts rather than...
So going back to the phones, let's see, where should we go? Let's go to Kelly in Kansas City, Missouri on line 3. And Kelly, welcome to the show. You're on with Dr. Wayne Dyer today.
Hello. Thank you.
Hi, Kelly.
For my call.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Well, I just had a question. I know you've talked about your father and how you forgave him. I've heard the story many times that you told it. What I'm wondering is, I've been to that place actually it's with my husband. And, just things from the past. Okay, we need to get over it, and I really feel like I've forgiven and it's over, and let's move on. And then something will happen maybe a few weeks later. He has a very bad temper sometimes, so, that will come on again, and, the past 15 years of everything that I thought I forgave is all right back in my face, and I just so angry, and he can just really be very sweet and nice, and then turn on a dime, and just, my children are starting to be affected by it. My oldest child is, to the point where she doesn't even want to be around him. And, it's a lot of anger in the house. So.
Yeah. Is there alcohol at all involved?
No, not really. No. I mean, actually, no, not at all. Every once in a while, he'll drink, but nothing, no.
But
not alcohol.
This temper thing, was it when you first met, before you were even married, and when you were, in that early stage of, what did you ever see that surface?
Actually, when I look back, yes. I mean, it's always been like this, and I think I had such low self-esteem that I just took it, and I've kind of gotten over that, worked on myself, and it's not quite as, it seems like it has dissipated, but it's a lot of times has now turned on my oldest daughter. So now I know exactly how she feels. I mean, she loves him, but in another way, she just hates him.
Does it ever go beyond just words?
Yeah, not really too physical, but just like pushing maybe once or twice. But just it can be very, very mean. And just even when he's not really angry, just little jabs and just... real quickly, what was his relationship, in a sentence or two, what was his relationship like to his father? His father, he really got along good up until recently, and now they still get along, but he drives him crazy. Pretty much everybody drives him crazy. But yeah, his father was, the way he describes him was nothing, very easygoing, like happy, and... Now, there was some alcohol involved with that, but very happy kind of a person.
Right. Okay. So what you're looking for, we only have a few minutes, so it's like what you're looking for is a way to deal with and live with someone who's got a bit of, bipolar is too strong a word because it sounds too technical and too diagnostic and so on, but basically that's what you're talking about. Someone who can just be on an even keel, can be up, can be happy and so on, and then something can trigger it and off he can go. And for some reason, he has come to believe that he has the right to abuse the people around him, especially the people that love him and care the most about him. Is that correct?
That is very correct, yes.
And he can do that with words and just an occasional pushing and so on, but just launch into one of those kinds of things. So what you need to understand is something I wrote about in my second book for the public many years, called Pulling Your Own Strings, which I would recommend you read, by the way. It's called Pulling Your Own Strings. And basically my theory on all of this is that you get treated in life the way you teach people to treat you. So that rather than putting it on him, because if you're waiting for him to change in order for you to be happy, you might just be consigning yourself to the role of victim for the rest of your life. Right. So what you want to do is stop teaching him that it's okay for him to, even if he has his, all the reasons within him, and to be able to, this person is wrong. His own father drives him crazy. His daughter drives him crazy. You drive him crazy, whatever it might be. And he thinks that it's somebody else that is doing all of this to him. he is basically just reacting that way, because I guarantee you that he wouldn't, if I were at your home and a guest in your home, he wouldn't do that to me. He wouldn't yell at me.
No.
There are lots and lots of places where he absolutely knows how to control himself when he's frustrated. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't do that at work, or not very often, because he wouldn't be at work if he did. So he really has within him the tools to know how to suppress that and to just overlook it. But when it comes to certain people, he just has given himself the right to do that. And the only reason he's got the right to do that is because you've given him permission to do it, for whatever reason, in whatever form that you've given that permission. I know you don't want it. I know that it's not something that you're looking for, but you have taught him that you're willing to treat. So what you want to do is embark on a program to teach him that kind of behavior is no longer tolerable in your life, that you've taught him that you're willing to put up with that in whatever way that you have done it over the years, and same with your daughter, and same with your father-in-law. But now what you're going to do is teach him something new, so that when the next time that he does this and has one of these outbursts and so on, I would talk about it with him when he's not in one of those places,
Right.
when you're having dinner or whatever, and just say that I have decided that I'm not going to, when you have one of those emotional breakdowns and so on, and start yelling at either me or our children or whomever, that I'm not going to put up with that anymore. It causes me too much pain. And I just want you to know that what I'm going to do is, when I see it surfacing, is I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave the premises. No matter how inconvenient it is, no matter what it is, I'm going to not stay in the presence and allow you to do that. And I'm going to also tell our daughter that that's what she's going to do as well. And even when you see it just beginning to surface, you stand up and you just say, excuse me, I'm just not going to be here right now. And you leave. You lock yourself in the bathroom, you go to the car, you go, drive yourself someplace, you walk out of the house, whatever it may be, no matter how embarrassing it may be. Now you're going to fundamentally change the way that you teach this man to treat you. Ultimately, if he, gets even worse, then you just say, okay, I just don't choose to live under these conditions any longer, and I'm going to get divorced, or I'm going to separate. I'm no longer willing to be the victim of a person who knows how to control these things under certain circumstances, but chooses not to when he's with me and our family. It's a choice that he is making, not that he got a personality defect that he can't control. Unless he's just going around doing this to strangers and things like that. It doesn't sound like that's the
he's
situation.
Completely the opposite with other people.
Yeah.
Other people
Right.
that know him wouldn't believe that in a minute. They'd think he's the greatest, nicest guy.
And I might even play this back to him. Because you can go online and this will play all week, this show, and you might even play it for him. This is like, I called in, nobody knows your name or anything, and this was the question I had, and this was the response, and I'm going to try, and this is what I'm going to do. Does that sound sensible to you, or something that you could do? Or
Yes, it does. Yeah, it's almost like I needed somebody to say it because it's kind of what I was thinking in the back of my mind.
Right.
Like, I can't just sit here and
and
listen and do this.
I raised my children this way. I always told them if they would raise their voice, if they'd get frustrated, they'd yell at their mother, they'd yell at me, or whatever it might be. And children do these things, and teenagers do these things, and so on. And if they would ever direct those kinds of comments towards me, I would just put up my hand and I'd say, wait a minute, we'll hold it right there. I have too much respect for myself to allow anybody to talk to me in that fashion. It isn't because I think you're so bad. It's just like, this is such an affront to who I am, that I'm no longer going to allow this to do. And when I would put my hand up to put a stop to that, it would stop. Dad doesn't put up with this because he respects himself.
Right.
Now, Mom has got to respect herself enough to be willing to do this because, it's ultimately going to lead down an even worse road. As long as he knows that he can get away with this and you're going to stick around, it'll continue. And you can do this very nicely and very quickly. When he starts behaving that way, you just get up, you go get in the car, drive, go for a walk, go into the bathroom if you can't, just lock the door in there and just stay, until it's over with. And you'll teach him very, very quickly that this is not something that I'm willing to tolerate for one reason and one reason only. I have too much respect for myself to allow anybody to talk disrespectfully to me.
Awesome.
That's my advice.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And by the way, when you change the atmosphere like that and do that, you will impact him. If you react with anger to yourself and allow, get into arguments and tell him I don't want to do this, and you may have things that just that come out that you don't want to come out, you have to remember that if, you don't eliminate darkness in your life. And this is darkness that you're talking about. You don't eliminate darkness by throwing more darkness at it. You eliminate it by throwing light at it. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Throw light at it. Like, teach him, I'm not going to allow myself to be placed into this darkness any longer. And it's like the line I've said so many times on this show over the years that, when Jesus would walk into a village, just his presence in the village and nothing more would elevate the consciousness of everyone in the village. You can elevate the consciousness of the people in your home by being a being of love and a being who refuses to allow this kind of behavior, because it's darkness coming at light, and light will always end darkness, but darkness never ends light.
Right. Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear. God bless you. In Kansas City, what's the temperature there?
Oh, about 12.
About 12?
Maybe, if I'm lucky.
Right. Yeah.
I try not to go out there today, so.
Well, thanks for calling. I love talking to you, and I hope that helps.
Oh, it does immensely.
Yeah.
You don't even know.
Thanks.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, dear. God bless you. Namaste.
And let's see if we can get to a few other people. Some really good calls
Sure.
today.
Good.
Interesting questions. And let's go to Jeanette on line 8, and she's calling from New Jersey.
Hi, Dr. Dyer. I'm so excited to hear your voice today. And it's
Thank
snowing
you.
here in Montclair, New Jersey. We're stuck in the house. The kids are outside enjoying the snow. So I'm so excited we connected this today.
I am too. It's great to hear from you in New Jersey. Listen, I'm going to close all the lanes down to all the bridges in your state. What do you think?
No. Oh, boy, that would be that.
That poor guy he's really dealing with it now, isn't he?
Oh, he sure is. They're all coming out now.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. But my question is, I just closed my toy store in October, and I've always read all of your books, have seen all your PBS specials, and have been trying to practice more and more what you talk about. And lately, I wanted to ask, how do you know when, you're actually connected to Source? Sometimes I know it's a wonderful, warm feeling, but I wanted to hear your description of it when you do sit and meditate and actually connect.
Well, the truth is you're always connected. What you have to ask yourself is, what direction am I going? I mean, who you are, who all of us are, our source energy. We have it within us. But the problem is that we walk away from it, but it's like you can't walk away from what you are. And what you are, it has a spark of God in you. And the best way to know that when it isn't ego, because ego is the part, it's like there are like these two forces. The Kabbalah teaches us that there are two forces. There's the force of light and there's a force of dark. And it's all the same force. I mean, but basically it's like, what direction is it going? When it is moving towards, hatred and bitterness and anger and judgment and resentment and fear and anxiety and stress and pain and so on, when you are moving in that direction, it's still, and I believe this and have written about this myself, that it's still love, but it's moving away from your source. Here's how I look at it. And then there's the other direction when you're moving toward it. So it's like, just picture the hands of a clock, okay? And at the top is there's two hands on the clock, okay? There's the minute hand and the hour hand. And you're born when both of them are right at the 12, right? So you can get a little metaphor of this in your mind. So now the not the hour hand, but the minute hand starts moving in the direction of towards, away from its source. The hour hand stays there. That's your source. And you are now moving. So you go past the 1 and you go past the 2 and you're moving away from your source. So this whole side all the way down to the 6 is each minute that goes by, or each hour, however you want to call it, that goes by, as you hit the 2 and as you hit the 3, 4, 5, this is all movement away from where you originated. You originated from a source of love, of perfect love, a source of what we call oneness, which means there's no opposites. The opposite of joy when you're in the ego state is sadness. But when you're in divine love, there's no opposite of joy. Everything is just joy. But you're not there because you're moving away until you get to the 6. And now you're at the 6. And this is when you're furthest away from your source. This is when you're at the lowest point in your life. This is when you feel that you've fallen as far as you can go. The anger, the hurt, the resentment, the pain is so deep there. And now you have a choice. You can either stay, you've moved away, taken on all this ego, believe that who you are is all the stuff that you own and all of the people that you're mad at and all the judgments that you have towards others. But now you're at 6. Now you can either stay there because the hand doesn't go backwards. It won't go back to the 5, 4. It doesn't work that way. You have to now start coming the other way. Now you're going to the 7 and the 8, and now you're coming home. And it's when you're on this side, when you're coming home back to where you originated from, you're heading back towards perfect love. And divine love is the kind of love that was your origination point. And this is when you know that you're connected. It's not whether you're there perfect, because as long as you're in a human body, there's going to be some separation. There's going to be opposites. And as long as you're on this planet, there's going to be east and west, and north and south, and up and down, and male and female, and good and bad. All of these dichotomies that we all experience and these paradoxes. But ultimately, when you get back to the 12, when you rejoin it, what happens is you fuse these dichotomies. And you're in a place where there's only love. There's no opposite. And as you start to look out at the world and see people behaving in certain ways, you still only have love, because that's all that you are as you're connecting yourself back. And you'll find yourself slipping when you're at the 8 and when you're at the 9, at the 10. But the closer you get to reuniting yourself with your source of being, the more that you will experience just feelings of bliss and love and kindness and joy. And when you're not, it's probably because you've got thoughts of judgment and criticism and condemnation towards some of God's children or some of the creations that we have or that you run into. And when you get rid of the judgment and the condemnation and the criticism, you're at the 7 and you're coming home. So the question isn't whether or not, you're with your source. The question is, what direction are you moving? Are you moving away from what you originated from? Because when you originated, I just saw something that's gone viral on the internet that my kid sent me. I'm thinking about posting it. I did post it on my Facebook page. It's of a little baby. And this baby is laughing at a dog that somebody's throwing popcorn at this little dog. And the baby's maybe 7 or 8 months old, if that. And it's just laughing. It's just it can't stop laughing. It's like it's at such bliss that it's this laughter. And it's like, William Wordsworth, a very famous English poet, said that our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. And knowing that you're with Source is remembering who you are, remembering where you came from, knowing that you don't, when you came into this world, you had no judgment. You just, you just were here, and you were just accepting, and your mom put her breast in your mouth, and you were just content and happy and gurgling and all of that. And then you took on this ego, and then you starting to believe, and then comparing yourself and trying to be better than other people, trying to accumulate more stuff than other people. All of this is movement away. And now you start coming home, and you become more and more like God, which is really just where you become a being of sharing, because that's what God is. God just offers us everything in the universe, whatever it is, the source that we came from. It's just a source of abundance, and it doesn't ask for anything in return. It just allows anything to be. And the more and more you find yourself doing those things, that's when you know you're reconnecting, or at least you're heading back to the source. And when you ultimately get back to the 12, this is when you just shed your body, and we call it death, but this is the place that we call immortality. That's what Emily Dickinson called it. She says, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. This is when you start to realize that who you are is this, you're not a human being having a spiritual experience. It's the other way around. You're this infinite spiritual being with a soul who's just having a little temporary human experience. And the closer and closer you get back to the 12, the more you know you're with Source. Long answer, but it's. I hope that made sense.
No, it did. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh, God bless you, dear. Thanks for calling today.
And we have just a minute, but I think time for one quick one.
Okay.
Slide one
I didn't
more
realize it
person
was
in.
that close. Okay.
Yeah, just 3 minutes. So let's
3
grab
minutes is
Kent real quick from Toronto. He's on line 2 and has been very patient holding. And Kent, we have just a few minutes, but you're on with Dr. Dyer.
Oh, hi. Thank you.
Hey, Kent.
Hi, how are you? I'm actually not in Toronto. I was in to come and see you in Maui in Divine Love last weekend, which I really enjoyed.
Oh, I'm so glad. What did you think?
It was great. And then, so I'm just staying with some friends in Honolulu. So I'm still enjoying your weather for now, and then I'm going to go back to my 25 soon. But no, I loved it because with say, Scarlett and Ilibagiza, they were talking about forgiveness, which kind of reminded me to forgive myself and forgive others. And then with Anita and Mary, they were talking more about, reminding me who I really am, which is divine love. So, but anyway, it was just great. It was just a great atmosphere. I really enjoyed.
Do you have still the hangover effect of it? Is it? Are you still feeling it? Because it's been over a week for me, and I've just been walking around awash and like I'm in a bowl of soup, that is called love. I mean, everything I look at it really impacted me that way.
Yeah, no, it's just very, like a joyful state or a blissful state, or just constantly reminding me who I really am. So not like I just loved the prior caller when you were talking about when I find myself in anger or frustration, to remind myself of compassion and kindness and joyfulness, and it takes me to another place. So, and when you said about that chapter 16, I reread Mary's chapter 16, and it's such a great reminder of who we really are. It makes me tingle when I read it, right?
It's called Out of the Blue, and Hay House, I talked to Reed, and who's a president of Hay House, and he's agreed that we're going to publish it. We're going to help her get the first parts of it edited, but it's very, very powerful. It's very seldom that I ever... Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm looking forward to that. So I came to see you in San Diego, the taping of I Can See Clearly Now, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. I'll probably see myself in the audience next week.
You will, definitely,
yeah. That was very good, too. So,
well, good.
Yeah.
And
no,
that
I just
was
wanted
after...
to thank you. I had a great weekend. It was very enjoyable, and it was a great feeling. So I just wanted to thank you thank you for putting that on.
I'm so happy that you were there.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm so glad to hear from someone who was actually there, and to see if it had the leftover effect that it's had on me. I'm just seeing love everywhere, even in my sore neck. I'm seeing love. What about that?
I think I got a sore neck too, so I'll have to look for the love in that too.
Yeah.
But that's
well,
great.
Thanks
I
for
just
calling.
wanted to quickly call and thank you very much for that weekend.
Well, I thank you, and I appreciate it. God bless you, my friend.
Very
Namaste.
good. Some great callers, and we will connect next week.
I hope so.
To watch another amazing Wayne Dyer video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
Guilt is the opposite of that. Guilt is using up the present moment to be concerned about something that you did or didn't do or should have done or didn't do right, but you're still doing it in the present moment. So worry and guilt, in my book, Your Erroneous Zones, I call these the useless emotion.
Part 4. Conversing with your spiritual source. Chapter 14. Your spiritual source can only be what it is. I cannot imagine a God who rewards and punishes the objects of his creation, whose purposes are modeled after our own, a God, in short, who but is a reflection of human frailty. Albert Einstein. And from Emanuel Swedenborg, we are because God is. 5 characteristics of God. Let's now examine the elements that most of us agree define the essence of our Creator, along with how they can help us sensibly approach Him. 1. God is love. We came from love, and we desire to return to that heaven while still on earth. I repeat Emerson's appropriate observation that love is our highest word and the synonym for God. In other words, if we dwell in love, we dwell in God. If God is love and cannot be anything other than what God is, and we wish to have a dialogue with God, then it seems to me that we come to our source in love, or we're wasting our time. God cannot and will not respond to unloving requests. No matter what our religion, whatever we want to discourse with our source of being, we must do so without malice or hatred in our heart. In this way, we'll shift our vibrational energy to a frequency that harmonizes with the highest vibration in the universe, which, of course, is that of spirit. As St. Francis instructs us so simply, where there is hatred, let us sow love. Love and forgiveness will then activate the dormant forces I talked about in the opening parts of this program. That is, the right people and the events will materialize synchronistically. This is because we're in spirit, remembering that God simply can't help if we expect Him to hear anything other than love and forgiveness. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, we must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. This seems to say it all. So in the private, quiet, prayerful moments of asking for God's help, don't ask Him to help defeat others in any way. Rather, pray, Dear God, Make me an instrument of thy love. I want to be like you. I have forgiven them, and I have forgiven myself. And remember that there can be no forgiveness without love. And without love, there can be no way of being heard by our source. 2. God is peace. One of the most quoted verses in the Old Testament, which may also be my favorite biblical offering, is this: Be still and know that I am God. So a corollary of this might then be agitated and turbulent, and you will never know God. Along with praying or communing with our source with peace in our heart, we must be still. This means taking time to get quiet before meditating, and also monitoring our breathing. As we exhale, we can train ourselves to let go of all of our non-peaceful thoughts. And as we inhale, we can breathe in spirit. We can also ask St. Francis to guide us. He had very little peace in his lifetime, but when he prayed, he knew what his source was like. St. Francis wanted to be in spirit. So rather than asking God to deliver him some peace so that he could escape the disorder and the chaos he saw all around him, he requested, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. In other words, St. Francis knew that God was peace. So in his prayer, he asked to be returned to a state where he'd be like his Creator. We can keep reminding ourselves that all of the non-peace that's in the world is not of God. It's of ego. Then we can ask to be helped back to his peace. This approach will attract the assistance we're requesting. It's all about matching up the vibrational energy of our desire for peace with thoughts and behaviors that are consistently peaceful with those desires. 3. God is all-inclusive. We won't be heard by or receive assistance from our source if we're touting our separateness from our fellow humans. You see, when we seek special individual favors from God, or even when we seek to converse with our source from this perspective, we're once again living an illusion. If God were to acknowledge our belief in separation, perfect oneness wouldn't and couldn't exist. It's impossible for a source that creates everyone, and therefore is in everyone, to even have a dialogue with someone who's harboring ideas of their specialness or separation from everyone else. In conversing with our source, as always, we strive to be more like it. So we need to see ourselves as connected to everyone in the universe as we enter into prayer. Then we can ask for guidance and assistance in summoning the all-inclusive spirit. Make me an instrument of you. Allow me to see you in everyone I encounter. Help me to see myself in others and to extend first to them what I aspire to myself. I've noticed that this is how you are, and I wish to be just like you. This is the kind of dialogue that activates the dormant forces I've spoken about. The key is getting past your ego-based idea of separation and instead seeing yourself as a part of the oneness of all. As Thomas Aquinas put it so succinctly, true peace consists in not separating ourselves from the will of God. 4. God is abundance. As St. Paul once said, God is able to provide you with every blessing in abundance. So why is there so much apparent shortage in the world, including people starving and living in poverty, and millions of folks having the persistent problem of too much month left at the end of the money? Well, what I can say for certain is that God is not to blame. There's more than enough to go around. After all, we came from a place that knows nothing of deprivation, and we arrived on a planet that has the capacity to grow the food and slake the thirst of every one of its inhabitants many times over. As a species, we human beings have brought the ideas of deficiency and depletions of God's gifts on ourselves, largely by taking very ungodlike actions. God serves all of us, but our greed has made us forget others and focus only on ourselves. As a people and as individuals, we've brought lack to our lives, and we can only fix this deficiency by becoming more like our always-serving, endlessly abundant spiritual source. The answers to the resolution of poverty and scarcity are readily available to us, and they'd be resolved tomorrow if we remembered that we're all one on this planet. We all share the same origins, and we all end up back in the same non-place where we began. When we return to spirit in our heart, our governments will align with this truth, and our leaders will emerge from in-spirit consciousness. We need to pray for the elimination of a perceived shortage and approach God in the style of St. Francis with words that go something like, "Make me an instrument of thy endless abundance," rather than asking God to fulfill something that's missing. In this way, we can summon his energy back to us, rather than staying focused on what we don't have. If we focus our thoughts on lack, we'll only attract more of the same. And 5, God is well-being. Spirit never has a fever and knows nothing of illness. So in my humble opinion, it makes no sense to pray or engage in a discourse with God from a perspective of asking to be healed, unless, that is, we have a firm understanding of what we mean by the word heal. If we mean to overcome an illness or infirmity, then I feel that we're again violating the truism that nothing can be what it isn't, including God. As Ernest Holmes once wrote, "The will of God is always good," which means to me that disease, sickness, and suffering are not part of God's energy. On the other hand, if we use the word heal to mean reconnecting to our source of well-being, then we're open to the potential of receiving assistance to overcome any infirmity. And that's how I use the word. I never asked God to help me to get over a feeling of sickness. Even when I had a minor heart attack 5 years ago, I asked to be made an instrument of God's well-being. I acknowledged that my body had taken on non-well-being, be it from my lifestyle, diet, and habits, or the toxins I breathe in and out, whatever. It was not of God, it was of me in this physical world, and I prayed to be reunited to a stream of well-being. I knew that I was a piece of God, and it was just as easy for him to heal a cut on my finger as it was to restore my heart to a healthy state. Since I knew that God's healing power was within me, I just needed to help my body remember this. Similarly, in a time of recent disharmony in my life, I found myself feeling sick to my stomach and unable to sleep, until I remembered that this experience was a gift to me. As I conversed with my higher power, I asked for guidance and visualized myself as a magnet attracting plentiful well-being, and in this way healing was virtually immediate. Before we go on to the next chapter, let's look back to the observation made by Emanuel Swedenborg. We are because God is. And add, not because of what God isn't. Chapter 15. Your spiritual source knows. Quote, "It is true that divine will prevails at all times and under all circumstances. There is no need to tell God your requirements. He knows them himself and will look after them." Ramana Maharshi. And from Ernest Holmes, "The thing we surrender to becomes our power." As the parent of 8 children, it goes without saying that I've witnessed many occasions when a 2-year-old made a request that couldn't be accommodated. Often the request became a standoff, with the toddler crying, insisting, and even throwing a tantrum. But since I was the adult, I'd stand firm and refuse to grant the child's wishes. Running around the block unsupervised, racing through the house with a sucker sticking out of his or her mouth, playing with electrical sockets, climbing up the stairs alone, and putting his or her finger in a younger sibling's eyes were some of the behaviors forbidden by me, the parent, who simply knew better. If we put ourselves in the place of toddlers and give our Creator the very same leeway that we as parents took with our children, the purpose of this metaphor becomes perfectly clear. Just as it's absurd for a 2-year-old to insist on having his or her way, our creative spirit doesn't need to be reminded of what to do for us or how to go about doing it. It already knows. In fact, there's a wonderfully enlightening quote in the Bhagavad Gita that says, "Only the fool, whose mind is deluded by egotism, considers himself to be the doer." When we're about to enter into a discourse with our Creator, it's crucial to approach with the understanding that we aren't the doer. It may sound a bit extreme, but this is how Immanuel Kant described our situation. God is our owner. We are his property. His providence works for our good. Please don't take the word owner as an insult. It's only the ego that's offended by this concept. In other words, we needn't presume to tell our source what needs to be done to provide us with a happy, fulfilling life. Instead, it's our job to change our thinking so that it's vibrating to a frequency that matches God's energy. And this begins by understanding that it's impossible for God to forget anything. Unlike human parents, God is omnipotent, so it's unnecessary to remind him of our needs. Trusting and surrendering. Returning to the analogy at the beginning of this chapter, most children are free-spirited little beings who don't think about questioning their parents' judgment. After all, most mothers and fathers know what's in their offspring's best interest, including what's required for successful survival. These senior partners look out for their kids' needs and direct their early life activities, and they do this as long as is necessary, which is usually until their children begin to develop the ability to trust their own instincts and apply what they've learned. As adults, we can look back on our earliest days with a strong sense of appreciation. We learned not to play in traffic, to avoid eating poisonous foods, to get enough rest each day, and so on. Today, we feel thankful and appreciative that our parents were there to guide us toward the responsible, self-contained people we are today. We can appreciate that they did what was best for us, and they never forgot us. I trust that the analogy is clear. Our relationship with God, our all-knowing, never-forgetting senior partner, is just like our childhood relationship with our parents. Just as we did with our mothers and fathers, we're now choosing to trust in the wisdom of our Creator. In other words, we don't need to be told by virtual parents what's best for us. We don't have to rely on so-called religious superiors to keep us in line because we're no longer needy little infants. We now trust our source because we've matured to a point where doubt has been supplanted by faith. Somewhere between childhood and maturity, we surrendered and trusted our parents just as we're now surrendering and trusting the all-knowing, loving source of creation. Co-creating with Spirit. Keep in mind that we can't co-create with anyone, including our spiritual source, unless we're in a place of harmony. To that end, we must suspend our false self, the ego, and stop all thoughts of resistance before we can participate in creating the inspired life we desire, in perfect symmetry with Spirit. Whatever we ask of our source in our prayerful communion will no longer be a wish or a hope. It will become a reality in our mind, just as it is in the mind of God. The how and when of its arrival, which have always troubled ego, are no longer issues. We maintain our optimism and thoughts such as, I desire it, it's in harmony with my source, or it's on its way, there's nothing to fuss about, and then we can relax and surrender to our knowing. Again, as Ernest Holmes reminds us, the thing we surrender to becomes our power. I know that the term surrender is generally associated with defeat, but there's no victor or victim when surrendering to God. This isn't about winning or losing. You see, what we're doing here is giving up our false self in favor of returning to our authentic self. And when we do, we'll meet our spiritual Creator and become empowered to live in the same vibration with it. We'll become co-creators by surrendering and joining the all-knowing, all-creating force that allows everything to come into existence. Then our knowing replaces our doubts, and divine will prevails at all times. Only now, we're in harmony with that divine will. Chapter 16. It's all about remembering. Quote from A Course in Miracles. The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. For a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. What you remember is a part of you, for you must be as God created you. Let all this madness be undone for you, and turn in peace to the remembrance of God, still shining in your quiet mind. Everything we've ever experienced is still stored as an invisible memory, and we can access it if we choose. For example, when my grandmother was close to death and doing what some call involuntary hallucinating, she was pulling out all kinds of facts from her earliest days. Street addresses, the names of neighbors, locations of family outings, relationships with friends of her own mother, who were only there in my grandmother's infancy. All of it was somehow available to her. It turned out that in some mysterious way, Grandma was tapping into memories that everyone else thought couldn't possibly be recalled because she was only a baby at the time. I have no idea how she did this. All I know for certain is that we reach into our own personal history and bring to the present thoughts that impact our state of mind as well as our level of inspiration. You see, the mere recollection of something in the past that we call a memory is capable of affecting us either positively or negatively in the present moment. Therefore, they're extremely powerful tools for our current state of mind. Obviously, there are some negative memories lurking around somewhere in the nethermost regions of our mind, but why access them if they're going to cause us to feel uninspired? What I'm trying to make clear here is that we've got to figure out how to return to where we came from in order to commune with our spiritual Creator. Therefore, being inspired itself is going to require us to go back and do some major remembering. Remembering your spirit. At the beginning of this chapter, There's a powerful quotation from A Course in Miracles that I feel sums up all we need to know to facilitate going all the way back, that is, prior to our baby days, our birth, and even our conception. It's about remembering our origination. I committed this passage to memory many years ago, and I use it as a way to remember who I truly am and where I really came from, particularly when I communicate with my Creator, to stay on purpose and in spirit. Now I'd like to go through each of the messages in this observation from A Course in Miracles one by one. Number 1, the memory of God comes to the quiet mind. We came from a quiet, peaceful place. That's the very essence of creation. So when our mind is filled with noisy dialogue, we shut out the possibility of remembering our spirit. Incessant chatter keeps us attached to the physical world and produces anxiety, stress, fear, worry, and so many of the emotional reactions that are decidedly removed from God realization. We must minimize distractions when we wish to communicate with God. So being in nature, away from the artificial noises that invade our space, is helpful. But the most important thing to consider is how to keep our mind free from the dizzying, bewildering cascade of thoughts flowing through our head from morning till night, and even on into our dream state. It's been estimated that we have something like 60,000 separate thoughts every day. The real problem is that we have the same 60,000 thoughts today that we had yesterday. I've made the practice of meditation a part of my daily life because it's one way to quiet the mind so that the memory of God is accessible. So by learning to meditate, or at the very least shutting down the inner dialogue produced, directed, and acted upon by your ego, you can open up a space for remembering and returning to spirit. 2, it cannot come where there is conflict. In order for conflict to exist, there must be two opposing forces at work. That is, one force, in the form of an idea, a point of view, a desire, or a contribution, directly clashes with another. Conflict defines our lives in many ways, as we oppose our partners, our children, our bosses, our neighbors, and even our countries. In politics, it's always one party versus the other. And the entertainment industry portrays battling points of view that are usually turned into violent scenes. Essentially, conflict requires two-ness. However, remembering where we came from involves our returning to the oneness of being in spirit. After all, there are no battling powers in the divine realm of spirit. There's only perfect oneness, and this is what we want to rejoin. We want to become one again with our Creator, and we can't retrieve this memory of God with a mind in conflict in any way. 3, for a mind at war against itself remembers not eternal gentleness. The second part of this teaching from A Course in Miracles reinforces that a combative mind cannot remember where it once resided in eternal gentleness. Obviously, you can't wage war and simultaneously focus on peace and gentleness, and it is eternal gentleness that you want to remember and rejoin. It's really quite simple to do this. Just close down the battlefield and surrender. Remove all of the artillery, send the soldiers home, and replace the instruments of war in your mind with thoughts of peace, tranquility, and surrender. Making your mind a place of peace is achieved by your own will, so steadfastly refusing to have thoughts of conflict allows you to activate the glory of remembering your spirit. 4, the fourth part of this quote. What you remember is a part of you. Every memory I have is me. What a glorious feeling it is to know this. We each have the power to retrieve any piece of ourselves that we desire and to experience it right here, right now, in this present moment. The great Danish theologian Søren Kierkegaard once observed that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. In other words, if we can't go back and remember the spiritual bliss that defined us before the beginning, we've really abandoned a part of ourselves. As we move into communion with God, we must know that our inability to remember our spiritual origins is another way of really saying, quote, I'm unable to know myself because I have no recollection or memory of my spirit. Unquote. In fact, the corollary of this line from A Course in Miracles that we're processing right now would be, what you don't remember is not a part of you. In other words, if we fail to remember spirit, then obviously it isn't a part of us. And 5, for you must be as God created you. As you communicate with your source of being, know that you're awakening a part of yourself that's just like God. In fact, you ought to try to approach communication with God by being as closely aligned to the way that you were created as possible. That is, by becoming a vibrational match to the all-loving Creator. Come to the quiet moments in consultation with God in love, in peace, and without judgment. As A Course in Miracles is saying, you must be as you were created. So why put on a false mask and pretend to be anything or anyone else? In this way, you can open the channel of communication because you finally remembered to be the way you were created. And that's the key to effective prayer. And as Gandhi once said, prayer is not an old woman's idle amusement. Properly understood and applied, it's the most potent instrument of action. And 6, let all this madness be undone for you, and turn in peace to the remembrance of God still shining in your quiet mind. Let's take the 3 suggestions in this teaching one at a time. First, A Course says, let this madness be undone. The madness here is that of living in a state of conflict. In other words, we must make an attempt to transcend the dichotomies of our life because the division creates so much suffering and keeps us from living an inspired life. I remember a Ram Dass lecture in which he said, I firmly come to the conclusion that there are no thems for me anymore. I can't be told who to hate, who to fight, who to subdue. I only see an us in my heart. All those messages to divvy up our world are insane. All our self-centeredness just drives our ego's insatiable appetite for making us special and putting other people down. All our inclinations towards violence, even when it's acceptable, such as supporting war in the name of patriotism or endorsing hatred in the name of doing our duty, are wrong. The Course encourages us to be done with this madness once and for all, both in our minds and in our actions. And second, we're told to turn in peace to the remembrance of God. Once again, we know in our heart that we came from a place of peace. So any discord can't be the result of our Creator's actions. God cannot come to us when we pray from non-peace, so the solution is to return to the remembrance of Him and ask to be made an instrument of His peace. When I find myself out of sorts, I remember. And what I remember is to turn to peace right now in prayer. I become peace rather than anguish, and I feel the calmness I long for come over me like a wave of pleasurable relief. We always have the power within us to shift into a peaceful mode. And when we respect someone, we're able to be in peace in their presence by suspending our inclination to be arrogant. For example, I recall watching John McEnroe behave in boorish ways on the tennis court, slamming his racket, hurling profanities at the referees, and generally being in a very non-peaceful state. But he never behaved this way when he played his rival, Bjorn Borg. Amazingly, McEnroe was almost always able to control his outbursts of negativity whenever he played this cool, easygoing, nonviolent, brilliant tennis player. Because he respected Borg so much, McEnroe came to his presence in peace. Finally, the Course reminds us that this peaceful remembrance is still shining in our quiet mind. Notice the words still and quiet. Regardless of where we are in life, if we're breathing, we're connected to our source of being. Even though the connection might have gotten a bit corroded, we still have the remembrance of God shining inside of us. It can't be otherwise. Our job is to access those memories, and it will help if we keep them in our quiet mind. This remembrance doesn't shine in our ego mind, our noisy mind, in our self-important mind. Rather, it shines in a quiet, nonviolent, peaceful, loving mind. When we go to the quietness, that shining is a luminous reminder of how to approach our creative spirit by remembering. You don't have to learn a single new thing in order to communicate and make conscious contact with your source. It's all in you already. All you have to do is remember. Chapter 17, The Language of Spirit. Quote from Satya Sai Baba. When asked where God is, people point towards the sky or some far and distant region. No wonder, then, that He does not manifest Himself. Realize that He is in you, with you, behind you, and all around you, and He can be seen and felt everywhere. Unquote. In the previous 3 chapters, I've tried to stress that it's our job to take responsibility for opening the channel to communication to God, rather than viewing Him as a cosmic bellboy whose job it is to listen to our whims and respond just because we ask. But how can we recognize when our spiritual source is getting in touch with us? As Jesus said in one of my favorite quotes, which I've shared thousands of times in my life, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Matthew 19:26. I'd like you to listen to the ideas I'm offering here concerning the language of spirit with this quote in mind. As weird as some of the communication patterns I talk about may seem, and as much as your ego may be tempted to dismiss them as mere coincidence and devoid of meaning, remember that, with God, all things are possible. Being ready for the teacher. It's been known for millennia that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, our teachers are always there because they're gifts from Spirit. The real question is our readiness to tune in to what they have to teach us. The key word here is readiness. That is, we must be open to all possibilities and trusting in our intuitive hunches. Wondering if something might possibly be a message from God is evidence that we're open to our intuition. Our thoughts are sacred and substantiate our connection to the divine, so they don't need to be corroborated by anyone or anything else. Our Creator is listening and responding in ways that don't necessarily correspond to the laws of the material world. That is, we won't be hearing from a physical source that's aligned with cause and effect, the laws of physics, or even what we believe is possible. It's our job to do all that we can to vibrationally match to that spiritual energy. We were once perfectly together with our creative force, and now we're being called to come back to it. It's vitally important to be open to the language of alignment. Most of us need to begin the process by recognizing our tendency to discount such messages as mere happenstance. In an infinite universe with an organized intelligence supporting it at all moments, there can be no such thing as accidents. For the rest of this chapter, I'll be offering some of my own hunches about how the all-knowing creative spirit communicates. Some of these ways fall into the category of inexplicable alignments, which means that there's meaning there, but our ego mind, chained as it is to its belief in the material laws it has always lived by, refuses to see the hidden meaning that's staring us right in the face. The 4 messages of alignment. For many years, I've felt what I considered to be the language of spirit speaking to me in ways that often defy my logical mind. These feelings are more than hunches and even go beyond intuition, and I sincerely believe that they've contributed to my living an inspired life. The following 4 examples aren't rules or laws that apply to everyone, but if they do work for others, I'll be even more inspired because it's my intention to be in a space where I'm able to give to others all that I know. I also offer these ideas with a constant reminder that when one listens to Spirit, all things are possible. And even though I'm offering them in a numbered sequence, they certainly don't conform to any linear arrangement. 1. Alignment of feelings. When I feel good, or God, I'm aligned with Spirit. As I tell my children, we must rely on how we feel to determine our state of health, rather than seeking our answers in a medical printout full of numbers. Feeling energized, content, excited, and happy are better indicators of our health and well-being than having our bodily functions assessed by a distant laboratory. A positive, honest response to the question, does this or will this make me feel good, tells us immediately if we're aligned with our creative source or not. 2. Alignments with nature. Everything in nature is in spirit. It isn't spoiled by ego, nor can it ever be. So when nature speaks to us, we should listen intently. When a wild bird touches us, for instance, or a fish brushes by when we're swimming in the ocean or a lake, I believe that it's a direct communication from our source of being. Since these creations of God instinctively keep their distance, when they depart from their DNA patterns to actually contact us physically, I think we should pay attention. So be aware of episodes in nature that arouse spirit and kindle an inner spark of awe and admiration for you. You don't have to discuss it with another being. If it has meaning for you, it's valid. Listen to the winds, the critters, the clouds, the rains, and the oceans. Listen to it all. Indeed, nature has much to teach us, and it will help show the way. All we need to do is align with its perfection and note how it aligns with ours. 3. Alignment with events. Strange occurrences and seemingly inexplicable events may actually be our all-creating source lining up coincidences, in quotes, to teach us and show us the way. The reason we begin to notice all this type of aligned synchronicity is because we've tuned into it. The teachers have always been there, but now we notice them. And our noticing indicates a new level of readiness to listen to our ultimate calling. In fact, these alignments can take some really interesting forms. The same numbers showing up, for example. We awake precisely at 4:44 morning after morning and then see those numbers appear on the odometer, on the radio, as a checkbook balance, at the deli counter, and as an assigned number for a charity walk, causes us to ask, what's going on here?
The answer is that the universe is using us to be receptive and pay attention. It's not about playing all fours in a casino or the lottery. It's about knowing that these seemingly accidental repetitions are actually invitations from Spirit to join it. When a book literally falls into our lap or is sent to us by several different people, or even when we keep seeing the title and having it referred to us by others over and over, we need to notice, stop our resistance, and surrender. When we end up reading the contents and applying what it offers, we're aligning ourselves and becoming a vibrational match to the same source that's sending us these signals. And 4, alignments with people. When people line up with our thoughts and mysteriously connect their physical presence with our private inner meanderings, we should take note. We must tell ourselves, Spirit is aligning my thoughts with events that are happening. I'll stay alert to what I'm being offered here because there may be a reason. That's all. Just be cognizant of what might be happening, and by being open to what may be baffling and perhaps indecipherable, we're likely to discover that we're being guided to learn. A few weeks ago, I was reading through a book I'd written 16 years ago. In it, I mentioned a friend, Erlene Rintz, whom I'd attended school with from 4th grade through high school. I put the book down and went jogging, yet Erlene was still on my mind. I thought, I'm going to call her the next time I'm in Detroit. After all, we're both having our 65th birthdays this year. That very evening, I was scheduled to receive the Martin Luther King Mahatma Gandhi Peace Award from the Unity Church of Maui, which would be attended by approximately 1,000 people. As I completed my speech and walked to the lobby to sign autographs, I saw the little girl who sat next to me in grade school and who was my first love and who occupied my thoughts throughout my school years. Believe it or not, as I was thinking of her more than a half-century later, Erlene was thousands of miles from home and hugging me in the lobby of a theater in Lahaina, Maui. It turns out that she was visiting Maui, had seen the award announcement in the newspaper, and had come to the auditorium to surprise me. It was one of those synchronistic alignments of spirit at work. Somehow, at an unconscious level, I was already reconnecting to Erlene without being aware that she was even in the area. Noticing the same folks showing up in different settings, running into people we haven't seen in a while after we've just heard their names mentioned, and repeatedly seeing an individual's name in magazines, on television, or in a local bookstore, are all synchronistic alignments. Spirit is lining up these sequential happenings for a reason. We just need to be open to learning the reason, and it most likely will be revealed. Perhaps it will be a dream or a sudden instant of eureka, or maybe it will become clearer when simply allowed. No matter how the message comes, we'll look back on it with a renewed insight and the benefit of no longer being closed-minded about such possibilities. What I know for certain within my very core is that there's no separation between us and all that we encounter in the universe. One of my favorite poets is William Butler Yeats, and here he perfectly sums up the ideas in this chapter. O chestnut tree, great rooted blossomer, are you the leaf, the blossom, or the bowl? O body swayed to music, O brightening glance, how can we know the dancer from the dance? You are the dancer and the dance, just as God is. In other words, those messages from Spirit are you if you feel them, because it's impossible to separate the dance from the dancer, the root from the blossom, and you from God. The only place where separation takes place is in your mind, but since you're now heeding your ultimate calling, you're right on your way to living an inspired life. Part 5. A personal look at inspiration. Quote from A Course in Miracles. There is a way of living in the world that is not here, although it seems to be. You do not change appearance, though you smile more frequently. Your forehead is serene. Your eyes are quiet. You walk this path as others walk, nor do you seem to be distinct from them, although you are indeed. Thus can you serve them while you serve yourself. Unquote. Chapter 18. How Life Looks When I'm Inspired. Quote, Give me a man who sings at his work, unquote, from Thomas Carlyle. And from Virgil, they can because they think they can. In this final chapter, I offer my own very personal view on how the world looks when I feel inspired. I'd like to acknowledge right from the outset that I don't live at this level of being in spirit 100% of the time. Like most everyone else, I occasionally have lapses and feel uninspired. Yet these moments have become rarer and rarer. In fact, it's difficult for me to recall a day in the past several years when I felt completely uninspired.
What follows is a personal account of how I feel inside and what seems to take place in the world around me when I feel connected to Spirit beyond what I can share here in this program. The story of Jack. The same day that I completed Chapter 17 and read it over the telephone to my editor, Joanna Pyle, on Bainbridge Island, Washington, I had the most profoundly mystical experience of being in spirit in all of my 65 years. The photograph on the cover of this program is a recreation of what happened. When I finished up with Joanna, I went for my daily hour-long walk along the beach. But for some reason, I elected to take a slightly different route along a grassy area adjacent to the beach. I was recalling my friend Jack Boland, a Unity minister in Detroit, who crossed over about a decade ago. Jack loved monarch butterflies, often telling stories of how he marveled at these paper-thin creatures who migrated thousands of miles in high winds and returned to the same branch on the same tree where they first emerged from their cocoons. Before Jack passed away, I presented him with a beautiful paperweight containing a dead monarch that I had found in perfect condition. When he died, his wife returned it to me, telling me how much Jack loved that gift and how much he admired these amazing creatures who had such mysterious intelligence built into their brains, which are the size of a pinhead. Jack always told me to be in a state of gratitude, and he ended every sermon with this message to God: thank you, thank you, thank you. On 3 occasions since his death, the monarch butterfly has landed on my body. Since these creatures studiously avoid human contact, each time this has happened, I've thought of Jack and thought, thank you, God, thank you, thank you. Anyway, as I walked, feeling grateful for having completed the second-to-last chapter of the book, a monarch landed on the ground 3 feet in front of me. I said Jack's magic words to myself, thank you, God, thank you, and felt deep appreciation for my life and the beauty of the day. The butterfly stayed right there until I approached it. Then it flapped its wings several times and flew away. Thinking of Jack and feeling a little bewildered and immensely thankful, I watched this creature in flight now 40 or 50 yards away. As God is my witness, the butterfly made a U-turn and not only headed in my direction, but landed right smack on my finger. Needless to say, I was shocked, but not totally surprised. I must confess that it seems to me that the more I stay in spirit, the more I experience synchronicities similar to this one. But what followed did border on the incredulous, even for me. This little creature became my constant companion for the next 2.5 hours. He sat first on one hand and then moved to my other hand, never even coming close to flying away. He seemed to be trying to communicate with me by moving his wings back and forth and even opening and closing his tiny mouth as if attempting to speak. And as crazy as it may sound, I felt a deep affinity to this precious living being. I sat on the ground and simply stayed with my new fragile friend for 30 or so minutes. Then I called Joanna from my cell phone, and she was also stunned by the synchronicity, insisting that I somehow get a picture of this event. At this point, I decided to return to my home approximately a mile from where I was sitting with my new companion. I returned along the beach walk where the winds were brisk. The butterfly's wings were pushed by these high gusts, but he clung to my finger and even moved to another hand without making any effort to leave. As I walked, I encountered a 4-year-old girl with her mother. The girl was sobbing over some perceived tragedy in her young life, and when I showed her my pet butterfly, her expression went from sad to blissful in one split second. She smiled from ear to ear and asked me all about the winged creature on my forefinger. When I got home, I was talking on my cell phone to my friend, Reed Tracy, as I walked upstairs. He laughed with me as I related the bizarre synchronicity at play at this very moment. I said, Reed, it's been 90 minutes, and this little guy has adopted me. Reed also encouraged me to get a photograph of this, since it was obviously in complete harmony with what I was writing. I left my new friend, whom I now call Jack, sitting on the handwritten Chapter 17 on my lanai, and went downstairs. I found Cindy, a young woman who works nearby, and asked her to run to the store and purchase a disposable camera. She did, and I went back to the patio, put my hand next to Jack, and watched him jump right onto my finger. The photo on the cover of this program is a recreation of that magical moment, and it's the exact butterfly as well. It appeared that my butterfly companion had decided that he was now going to live with me forever. After another hour or so of meditating and communing with this little creature of God and pondering this event as the most unprecedented and out-of-the-ordinary spiritual experience or episode I'd ever encountered, I gently placed Jack back on my manuscript while I proceeded to take a long hot shower. When I returned to the patio, I placed my finger near my winged friend, and as I'd done many times in the previous 150 minutes, but he now seemed like a totally different little critter. He fluttered away, landing on a table, flapped his wings twice, and flew off straight upward toward the heavens. Moments with him were now history, but I still had the photographs, which I treasure. The next morning, I decided to watch one of my favorite films, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, which I hadn't viewed for more than a decade. And sure enough, in the opening scenes of Franco Zeffirelli's interpretation of the life of St. Francis, there he was, with a butterfly alighting on his fingers. Inspirational vibrations. When I live my life so as to be open to the language of spirit, I find almost overwhelming rapture overtaking me. For several days after my experience with Jack, people kept telling me that I seemed so peaceful and content, and one woman even suggested that I was walking grace. This episode with my butterfly friend and the communiques from spirit touched me at an unprecedented level. From the perspective of being in spirit, I've seen its hands embrace me and heard it say, "You are not alone. You can count on me to guide you, and whatever you do not doubt my presence." This makes me feel safe, comforted, and that I'm not alone. I feel good. I feel God, because I'm living in almost perfect harmony with the source of my being, living on purpose and writing from my heart. The reason I feel inspired isn't because the world looks perfect. Rather, it's the other way around. The reason the world looks perfect to me is because I'm in spirit, a person who chooses to live an inspired life. I'm able to stay in a state of gratitude from the moment I awake early in the morning, right up until I close my eyes while falling asleep. And throughout each day, I'm reminded that staying in spirit is really about staying in vibrational harmony. I don't find it necessary to change anyone or anything that I encounter or read about in my daily life. Each time that I'm tempted to, I catch myself and return to a mindset that calls to me to be more like God, right here and right now. I stay inspired by making an energetic shift within myself. When I do, the world looks completely different, and I move inwardly toward peace and kindness. The energetic shift is merely a way of processing people and events from the insight of being unified with the all-creating source. That is, by eschewing judgment and allowing the world to be as it is rather than as I think it should be. I stay inspired by encouraging others to live out their destiny and allowing the world to unfold as it will, and I'm much more likely to feel peaceful. In fact, when I'm living my life from this perspective of inspiration, my vibrational energy is more attuned to that of the creative energy of the universe, and I find that my effect on others is far more spiritually aligned. Furthermore, I know within my own being that I'm doing something very powerful to make this world a more spiritually oriented place for us all. You see, when I resonate to anger, shame, hatred, or revenge, I add to these decidedly non-spiritual energies by joining in what I find to be so objectionable. But when I remember to bring non-judgment, love, tolerance, and compassion to these low, ego-dominated energies, I see how different the world looks, and even how different those around me act in the presence of these God-realized energies. I feel optimistic when I'm in spirit, with an inner knowing that nothing can interfere with an idea whose time is coming or has already arrived. I trust that our Creator knows what it's doing and that good triumphs over what ego believes is bad or evil. I sense that we're all moving toward a world that will no longer know the horrors of war or practice our long-established habits of inhumanity toward our brothers and sisters around the globe, who may have different cultural views and their own unique physical distinctiveness. By staying in spirit, I'm truly inspired to see the potential for greatness that's in all of us as one people, and I turn from anguish to faith that at least I can live from a place of God realization and practice being a force for good or for God. Staying in vibrational alignment with spirit allows me to be more present in all of my life activities. I find myself less concerned with goals, outcomes, winning, and accumulations, and far more involved in the process of enjoying the activities of my life. Arriving seems to replace striving, and being in a state of flow is far more common than my old, uninspired state of worry and anguish. I remind myself that spirit is only here and now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, only now. By keeping my vibration aligned spiritually, I see the ecstasy in the present. Everything else that once was a source of worry doesn't come up for me, since the outcomes are already handled for me in my own mind. What will be, I remind myself. The world looks so much more peaceful when I approach it this way, and my ego, which once needed to win at all costs, is relegated to a distant seat in a stadium in another galaxy. Choosing inspiration. My experience with Jack, as well as many similar kinds of episodes in my life, taught me that the laws of the material world truly do not apply in the presence of God realization. And I know that I have the choice to live at this level of inspiration. When I do so, it seems that the world changes. Animals behave differently than their biological genetics would seem to allow. People at a distance seem to hear me telepathically and respond to my highest thoughts. Objects seem to materialize in defiance of what scientists say is possible. And healing takes place in spite of modern medicine saying otherwise. In other words, miracles seem to be ordinary. The world looks like a place where everything is possible, where restrictions and limitations are non-existent, and where the power of our Creator seems to roll right up and land at my feet, begging me to hop on board and witness the infinite possibilities it offers. This is how I feel when I align myself to Spirit, cocky inside because I know something that so few ever come to realize, but humble and awestruck on the outside at the miraculousness of it all. When I remember to stay in Spirit, I've realized that when one thing appears to be going wrong, I can see clearly that 10 things are going right. For example, if my cell phone isn't working, I can note that my health is fine, my family is safe, the ocean is calm for swimming, my bank account has a surplus, my electricity is fully functional, and so on, and on it goes. From a perspective of being in Spirit, I automatically shift my attention away from what's going wrong and onto what's right. This then becomes my point of attraction, and I attract more of what I'm focused on, whereas at an earlier time in my life, I'd attract more of what was going wrong because that was my point of attraction. How sublimely beautiful the world now looks to me from this magnificent place of inspiration. No longer do I stay focused on and attract more of what's going wrong, for I've learned to place my attention on what's right, what's working, and what's aligned with the all-creating Spirit. From this place of inspiration, I ask, what if I looked deep within myself and found no original sin at all? That is, what if I discovered original innocence instead? What if the same were true for everyone? I know that our creative source is one of good, and I also know that we must be like what we came from. Therefore, everyone, including myself, is a piece of God. We came to this world from innocence and love, not from a place of sin or weakness. When I see Christ consciousness in everyone, even those with whom I differ greatly, I'm able to feel good, to feel God. When I know that there's no original sin in anyone, I'm able to think like Mother Teresa, who told the world, in each person I see the face of Christ in one of his most distressing disguises. When it is goodness that I look for, rather than sin and weakness, that's what I see. I then see goodness in the little old lady driving slowly in front of me, the elderly man fumbling with his change and delaying me at the cashier, the children squealing loudly as I'm attempting to concentrate on a book, the teenagers shouting along with their ear-splitting rap music, or the jackhammer operator whose deafening sounds fill the air with chaos. When I'm inspired, I see God realization, disguised as a minor blip, and the world looks fine, happy, and even peaceful. I remind myself of Rumi's sage advice, if you're irritated by every rub, how will you ever be polished? When I feel inspired, I notice how much zest I have for life and everything that I do. I play tennis with exuberance and without fatigue. I write from my heart. I feel good. I feel God. And this inner feeling radiates outward in all of my waking moments. Inspiration means doing what I love, and even more significantly, loving what I'm doing. It's my willingness to bring love and passion to the activities of my life, rather than looking for love to emerge from those events and activities. It's an attitude, and knowing this, I remember to pick a good one as often as possible. I know that being enthusiastic feels good, and I also know that I have the choice to select these attitudes at any and all times. By staying in Spirit, these outlooks on life become second nature to me. By deciding to live an inspired life, I'm choosing to be in balance with a creative force that responds to my in-spirit thoughts. I'm also believing that I live in a friendly universe rather than an evil one, and feeling supported by it in a similar manner, being grateful for all that God sends my way. I'm not surprised when synchronistic events happen in my life. When I have someone on my mind who lives some distance from me, I actually expect that he or she will call me, and it occurs over and over and over. I know that thoughts are energy, and that those harmonizing with Spirit will align to activate the creation process. I love watching all this flow so perfectly and being in harmony with the force that's responsible for all of creation. I know deep within me that I can participate in the activities of this force to bring into reality the manifestation of my spiritually aligned desires. Rather than hoping, wishing, and even praying for an outcome, my inner world aligns with the idea that what I desire is feasible and on its way. This kind of inspired knowing frees me from anxiety and worry. I affirm, it's on its way. There's absolutely nothing to fuss about. And I leave the time of its arrival into my life in the hands of the all-knowing, always creative spiritual source. I find that I no longer question the creator of the universe because I'm at peace with the timing of everything. I know enough now not to push the river, not to demand that the timetable of my ego be the same as God's. I know that by staying in spirit, I'm actually participating as a co-creator, and that the more I stay in this aligned space, the more it seems to speed up the process. I've noticed that ever since I've become more conscious of staying inspired, and all that this implies, the time between what I think and having it actually show up in my physical life has become shorter and shorter. I'm aware that the ultimate in manifestation is a complete absence of any delay between a thought and its physical manifestation. What's been called the gift of loaves and fishes is what true 100% God realization is. That is, think food and it appears. Think well-being for everyone and disease dissolves. While I know that this Christ consciousness is available for all of us, I have many more glimpses of it as I stay more in spirit. Singing my song. The major change that's taken place for me in this manifestation of my inspired desires has been the awareness of my own capacity for activating the creative force to work with me. Today, as I live consciously in spirit, I feel as if I'm more and more able to be an activator of this divine synchronistic force and have it work with me rather than to me. I view these mystical moments as holy instants when my ego is suspended and spirit, in conjunction with my own divine desires, has become the teacher. As my sense of inspiration grows within me, I find myself wanting to do more for others and focusing less upon myself. What I desire is realized through the paradoxical means of desiring it for others even more than I want it for myself. By reaching out in this way and deliberately looking for ways to inspire others, I feel closer and closer to spirit, and ironically, I sense that more of what I desire seems to be flowing back to me as a result of this sharing. At this point in my life, I feel that staying in this glorious state of inspiration practically requires me to avoid condemning others. I look at the behavior of others, even those whose actions are anathema to an inspired world, and I send them love. I know deep within me that declaring war on the problems of violence, poverty, cancer, AIDS, and drug addiction isn't the solution. I'm uninterested in increasing these problems with violent, angry, or hateful thoughts or behavior. I know that I can't get sick enough to make one person better, or angry enough to end violence anywhere. I also sense very strongly that by staying in spirit and bringing a higher mental energy to the presence of these lower, ego-based energies, I'm a force for change, one that helps move the world closer to spirit. I anticipate a planet at peace, along with health, abundance, and love in my life and in the lives of all others. And I know that it's moving in this direction. I know that for every act of apparent evil, there are a million acts of kindness. That's where I place my attention, and that's what I choose to give away. By doing so, for the larger percentage of my days, my reward is a feeling of being in harmony with purpose. I watch the mynah birds sing every morning, and I know they're not doing it because they have the answers to all of life's problems. They have a song inside of them that they obviously feel compelled to let come out. I too have a song to sing, and by staying in spirit, I'm able to sing it all day, every day. I know that the answer to what should I be doing is to see the word yes on my inner screen. Yes, I am listening. Yes, I am paying attention. And most important, yes, I am willing. I notice that those around me who feel uninspired or unwilling to say yes to the feelings at the core of their being. By doing so, to every hunch, burning desire, and thought that won't go away, I feel the hand of a guiding spirit that's with me simply because I've been willing to say yes. By saying yes to life, I see the world and all of its inhabitants in a completely new way. As a result of being more and more inspired, I see spirit in virtually everyone I meet. And I feel much more connected to everyone as a result of sensing their spirit instead of noticing all of the accumulations of success that they've amassed. I call this seeing with my mind and not my eyes. It now seems that my identity is associated with experiences that are not exclusively of this world. And I love what my mind sees. Possibilities and openings for miracles. It looks past the limitations of my eyes, and it knows that we're all one in an infinite world. My mind no longer views death as something to fear. Rather, it lives in an infinite place, and it is able to step back from this corporeal world and be an observer. Adequately conveying how I feel when I'm inspired is probably impossible. What I so sincerely want to share here is that the feeling of being completely in harmony with our source generates miracles everywhere. I have the delicious, spine-tingling sensation of bliss as I observe and interact in this world from the wondrous vista of being inspired. These words from A Course in Miracles ring true for me. All that must be recognized, however, is that birth was not the beginning and death is not the end. This is the knowing that I have from this infinite in-spirit perspective. There are no conflicts. All is as it should be. The things I wish to improve aren't going to be accomplished by fighting, but by placing my attention on staying connected to Spirit. In 1 Corinthians, St. Paul says, "The very fact that you have lawsuits among you means you have been completely defeated already." As I live from a place of inspiration, I see that conflict is no longer possible for me, and I understand what Paul was attempting to say to the people of Corinth in that letter. I will not be defeated. I can't, because for me there's no they any longer. There's only us. I've turned my mind to Spirit. I know that God created me to be like Him, and I must be what I came from. This idea, more than any other, inspires me beyond what I can share here in this program. It's my intention to continue to stay inspired and live what my mind knows, rather than only what my eyes see. And my mind knows that we're all in a universe that has a creative, organizing intelligence supporting it. I know that it flows through me, and God willing, I'll stay in spirit and assist you to live that life of inspiration that you came here to live. There can be no greater blessing. I send you love. I surround you with light. And I invite you to live with me in spirit. God bless you. Namaste.